People disappeared on the Queen Mary. That's a fact. Official records say some passengers simply never disembarked. Others were found, but they were different. Strange. As if they weren't entirely themselves. 5 friends decided to spend the night on this legendary ship, convinced that all these stories were nothing more than myths. But by morning, one of them was gone. The cabin door was locked from the inside, and the cameras didn't capture any movement. The only thing left in his place, wet footprints leading to the old swimming pool. They decided to find him. But the question wasn't where he had gone, it was who he would become when they found him. Ready to find out what happened that night? Part 1. Arrival on the Queen Mary, Night Whispers and Wet Footprints. Spending the night on the Queen Mary seemed like a great idea to the friends. 5 longtime buddies, Adam, Jason, Kevin, Mike, and Sarah, loved extreme adventures. They used to go hiking together, explore abandoned places, but this time, they decided to test their nerves on the legendary liner known for its ghosts. They arrived in Long Beach late in the evening, just as the sky turned crimson. The Queen Mary loomed over the water, majestic and eerie at the same time. It felt like a shadow from the past, an immaculately preserved 1930s ocean liner hiding hundreds of stories within its corridors. The friends knew this place was surrounded by legends. People claimed that the ghosts of passengers appeared here, that children's laughter could be heard, and that shadows of those who had vanished wandered near the old swimming pool. "Just look at this!" Jason exclaimed, taking a selfie with the ship in the background. "This is like a horror museum. I think it'll be fine." Adam smirked. "A tourist attraction, nothing more." "Yeah, right, until one of us wakes up at night and sees wet footprints by the bed," Sarah added, mimicking a spooky voice. Smiling, they boarded the ship. Inside, it was nearly empty. Narrow corridors, dim lighting, the scent of aged wood, it all made them feel like they had truly stepped back in time. They had booked 2 adjacent cabins, 340 and 341. Sarah and Jason took the first one, while the rest stayed in the second. The first few hours were spent exploring the decks. They found the old ballroom, visited the engine room, and looked at photographs that told the ship's history. The atmosphere grew heavier. A couple of times, Sarah thought she saw something move in the reflection of a window.
"Did you see it too? Or was it just me?"
Mike said he could swear he saw a hatch open on its own in one of the corridors. "It's just an old ship." Kevin shrugged. "Everything creaks, moves, it's got a life of its own." By the time they returned to their cabins, it was already midnight. "Okay, who's up for a trip to the pool?" Jason smirked. "Dude, it's been closed since 1967. Adam laughed. "But what if it's still waiting for visitors?" Sarah whispered, turning off the light. Everyone settled into their beds, trying not to think about the eerie stories. But sleeping wasn't easy. Somewhere beyond the walls, faint sounds echoed, as if someone was whispering. Now and then, it seemed like small footsteps ran down the corridor. Kevin's eyes snapped open in the middle of the night. He wasn't sure what had woken him. The cabin was quiet, with only a sliver of light from the hallway creeping under the door. He was about to turn over and go back to sleep when he noticed something strange on the carpet. Near Mike's bed, there were several wet footprints. They looked as if someone barefoot had been standing right there, but they had all been asleep. Part 2. Mike's Disappearance. Footprints lead to the pool. Kevin froze, staring at the damp footprints. They were clear, as if someone had been standing barefoot beside Mike's bed, but what was even stranger, the prints didn't lead to the door, but from under the bed. He didn't know what to do, wake everyone up or just close his eyes and pretend nothing had happened. His heart pounded in his chest as he listened carefully to the darkness. Silence. Only the distant murmur of the ocean outside and the faint creaking of wooden panels. By morning, he was one of the first to wake up. The first thing he did was check the carpet. The footprints were gone. The carpet was dry, as if nothing had ever been there. He wanted to believe it was just his imagination playing tricks on him, but the uneasy feeling remained. He sighed and glanced at Mike's bed. It was empty. At first, Kevin thought he had simply gotten up early and stepped out, but his phone, wallet, and shoes were still there. Adam was already awake too, and when he noticed Mike was missing, he just shrugged. "Maybe he went to grab some coffee," Let's head down for breakfast. We'll find him there. But Mike wasn't at breakfast. He wasn't in the hallways, on the deck, or in the lounge. He was gone. Anxiety slowly turned into panic. Sarah started calling his phone, but there was no answer. Finally, they went to the front desk. Your friend, you say? The man behind the counter looked a bit concerned. Are you sure he didn't just step out? His stuff is still in the cabin, Sarah replied anxiously. His phone too. The administrator studied them for a little longer than necessary. Then he nodded and opened the logbook. I'll ask security to check the cameras. They waited at the counter for nearly an hour. Eventually, a security guard approached, a serious-looking older man. He looked at the group and asked, You're saying your friend disappeared overnight? Yes, Jason answered. But the security footage shows that no one left your cabin all night. The silence that followed was almost tangible. That's impossible. Kevin lifted his head. He's gone. We checked all the exits, the guard said firmly. The last thing the camera recorded outside your room was your friend entering the cabin. And after that, nothing. The friends exchanged uneasy glances. Had he just vanished into thin air? Listen, the administrator said after a pause. Maybe he's just playing a prank. It happens here sometimes. Especially after certain stories. What stories? Sarah asked. The man sighed, as if he didn't want to say it, but he still answered. A long time ago, back in the 1930s, there was a passenger who disappeared under similar circumstances. He was last seen near his cabin, but he was never found again. But what they did find. What? Adam's voice cracked. Were wet footprints leading. Leading where? To the pool, the administrator said quietly. Part 3. The cameras didn't capture anything, but someone was in the cabin. Kevin felt a chill run down his spine. The pool. Why there? The Queen Mary's pool had been closed since 1967. Officially, for safety reasons, but there were other rumors, stories of people drowning, of a woman in an old-fashioned swimsuit seen there even after it was shut down. And now, wet footprints and Mike's disappearance. We need to check the pool, Adam said firmly. Seriously? Jason ran a nervous hand through his hair. What are we even gonna find? We should just go to the police. And tell them what? Sarah's voice trembled slightly. That our friend vanished from a locked cabin and there were wet footprints on the floor that magically disappeared. Jason fell silent. They all knew the authorities wouldn't take this seriously. This place was a tourist attraction, strange things happen all the time, and every incident was brushed off as just another scary story. Fine, Jason finally agreed. But if there's nothing down there, we're going to the cops. The pool was on another level of the ship, deep within its structure. The descent was unsettling. The hallways grew darker, the lights flickered, and the silence felt unnatural. Even the sounds of the ocean didn't reach this far. It was as if they had stepped into another world, one where time had stopped. Finally, they reached the massive double doors. They were slightly open. They're not supposed to be left like that, Sarah murmured. Inside, it was damp. The scent of old chlorinated water lingered in the air. The pool was empty, but at the bottom, a dark wet stain spread across the surface, as if someone had been standing there recently. Water? But from where? The pool had been dry for decades. Jason aimed his flashlight downward, and they all froze. On the damp floor were footprints. Barefoot. Moving in circles. What the hell is... Kevin started, but Sarah suddenly gripped his hand. Shh, she whispered. Do you hear that? At first, they heard nothing. But then, a sound. Like water dripping off someone's body. Slowly. Once. Twice. 3 times. It was coming from the shadows beneath the old lounge benches. Jason's flashlight jerked toward the noise, illuminating nothing. But Sarah felt the hairs on her arms rise from the cold. She took a step forward, and then her heart nearly stopped. Next to her, reflected in the dark glass of an old mirror, was a figure. Tall, thin, and wet. Part 4. A hidden passage in the old pool. What does it conceal? Sarah jerked back, her breathing unsteady. The reflection was still there. A tall, wet figure stood behind her. But when she spun around, there was no one. Only dampness in the air and the unsettling feeling that someone was standing too close, even though the space around her was empty. "What happened?" Kevin whispered, noticing her trembling hands. "There was." Sarah stared into the mirror, but now she only saw their own reflections. "Something was there." "I saw it too," Adam said quietly. Silence settled over them as they listened. The pool was deathly still, the only sound being the faint electric hum of the flickering lights. But the feeling of a presence didn't fade. If anything, it grew stronger. "We need to get out of here," Sarah said, forcing herself not to look at the mirror. "Wait." Jason crouched by the edge of the pool, his fingers brushing against the damp tiles. "There's something here." He ran his hand along the surface and felt a small indentation, an almost imperceptible gap between the tiles. "It's some kind of hatch," he whispered. Adam helped him, and after several tries, the cover gave way with a dull creak. A narrow shaft opened before them, descending into darkness. A wave of cold air rushed up, chilling them like an open freezer. "Is this part of the old drainage system?" Kevin guessed. "I don't know, but why does it open from inside the pool?" Sarah muttered. Jason switched on his flashlight and shined it down. A metal ladder led into a cramped concrete tunnel. "Anyone want to check it out?" he joked weakly, but no one laughed. "If Mike's down there," Kevin started, but he never finished his sentence. Behind them, heavy, wet footsteps echoed through the air. More than one. And they were getting closer. "Run!" Sarah hissed. But Jason had already made his choice. He dropped down the ladder in one swift movement. Adam followed immediately. Kevin, realizing they had no other way out, jumped in after them. Sarah was the last to descend, and just as her feet touched the concrete floor, something slammed against the edge of the hatch above. Kevin yanked the cover shut. In the last second before it closed, he caught a glimpse of a pale, wet hand reaching for them. Then darkness. "What the hell was that?" Sarah whispered, trying to control her panic. "I don't know," Adam said, sweeping his flashlight over the narrow tunnel. "But if Mike is down here, we need to find him fast." And so they moved forward, unaware that this tunnel led much deeper than they could have ever imagined. Part 5. Found, but not who he used to be. The tunnel felt endless. The damp walls reflected the flashlight beams, creating an illusion of movement in their peripheral vision. It was humid, the air thick with the stale scent of standing water, and beneath their feet, something squelched as if they were walking on soaked fabric. Kevin felt the panic rising in his chest but forced himself to breathe evenly. They moved in silence, none of them wanting to break the oppressive stillness. "This is definitely not just a drainage tunnel," Jason muttered as the passage began to widen. They emerged into a small room that resembled a maintenance area. Old pipes snaked along the walls, and the floor was covered in mold. But the most unsettling part, a wooden chair stood in the center, surrounded by wet, bare footprints, as if someone had been standing there for a long time without moving. "Do you see this?" Sarah pointed at the wall. Someone had scratched words into it, either with nails or a knife. Some were blurred, nearly erased by the dampness, but a few letters remained legible. "They are watching. This is too much," Adam whispered. "We need to find Mike and get the hell out of here," Jason added. Kevin stepped toward the only door in the room. It was heavy metal, its paint peeling. He touched the handle, ice cold, as if wet fingers had just gripped it. Taking a deep breath, he pulled the door open. Beyond it was another corridor, but wider. The walls were lined with old, cracked wallpaper, the kind that might have been there back when the ship still carried passengers. The flickering lights cast jittery shadows that seemed to shift and move, though no one was stirring. And then, at the end of the hall, they saw Mike. He stood with his back to them. "Mike!" Sarah called out and started forward, but Kevin grabbed her arm. "Something's wrong," he whispered. Mike didn't react. He just stood there, his arms limp at his sides, dark, wet stains spreading across his clothes. Water dripped from his sleeves, his pants, his hair, pooling on the floor beneath him. "Dude," Jason spoke cautiously. "Are you okay?" Mike's head snapped toward them. But it wasn't his face. His eyes were too black, his skin too pale, like he had been underwater for far too long. His lips moved, whispering something soundless. And then he took a step forward. Part 6. Endless hallways and the one searching for new passengers. Mike slowly moved forward. His motions were jerky, as if he had forgotten how to use his own body. Water dripped from his fingers, leaving dark stains on the floor. Sarah took a step back, her chest rising and falling rapidly with panicked breaths. "Mike?" Jason's voice wavered. "This is a joke, right?" He didn't respond. He only tilted his head to the side, his lips continuing to move soundlessly, as if he was repeating something over and over in his mind. Then, suddenly, he lunged forward. Sarah screamed. Kevin grabbed her arm, pulling her back, while Adam, acting on instinct, shoved Mike in the chest. Mike staggered but didn't fall. His body was too heavy, as if it was filled with water. "Run!" Jason shouted, and they all bolted into the darkness of the corridor. They ran, gasping for air, but something was wrong. The hallway they had passed through just minutes ago had stretched. More doors lined the walls, the dim light barely reaching the far end. And behind them, the sound of bare, wet feet slapping against the floor grew closer. Kevin glanced over his shoulder, and his mind refused to accept what he saw. Mike was no longer Mike. His face was distorting, as if someone was trying to erase his features. His eyes had become two black voids, and his mouth was stretching wider and wider. They rounded a corner, barely avoiding slamming into the wall. "Where's the exit?" Adam panted. "I don't know." Sarah spun around. There was nothing behind them. The hallway was empty. He's gone!" Jason swallowed hard. Sarah took a cautious step forward, and something crunched beneath her shoe. She looked down and saw a wet map of the ship. It looked old, its edges softened, as if it had been submerged in water for too long. She picked it up and unfolded it. Something was marked. A place that wasn't supposed to exist. "This," Kevin leaned in. "It shows an exit through some kind of maintenance shaft. But this corridor, it's not on here. Or maybe it is," Sarah whispered, tracing a finger over the map. "But only for those looking for a way out." They didn't understand what she meant until Kevin accidentally leaned against the wall. It shifted. Without thinking, he shoved his shoulder into it, and a section of wallpaper gave way, revealing a narrow, dark passage. "Move! Now!" Adam shouted. They rushed inside. Behind them, in the corridor, the sound of wet footsteps returned, louder, closer. They ran through the tunnel, their flashlights flickering, their hearts pounding in their ears. The exit was near. Up ahead, a pale gray opening loomed like an open maw. They stumbled through, shoving each other, just as the corridor behind them began to close in. Sarah took one last look back. Mike stood in the darkness. He didn't move. He just watched. And in the final moment, before the passage sealed shut, they heard his voice. "See you soon." The black void collapsed, and they found themselves on the ship's deck. By morning, the police had taken their statements, but of course, no one believed them. Security footage had vanished. Their phones had erased all records of that night. Mike was never found. The police claimed he must have fallen overboard. But they knew the truth. And every night, when they dream of ships, they hear the same thing. Wet footsteps. What would you have done in Kevin, Sarah, Adam, and Jason's place? Would you have dared to explore the eerie tunnels beneath the Queen Mary to save a friend? Or would you have left before it was too late? And the most important question, was that really Mike they found in the corridor? Or something that only looked like him? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your theories and guesses. And who knows, maybe this ship is still searching for new passengers who will never step ashore again. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. There are plenty more chilling stories ahead. If you spotted any inconsistencies or have your own take on what happened, let us know. This script was narrated using AI voiceover, and your feedback means the world to us. Just, before you go to bed tonight, check the floor near your bed. Wet footprints can appear where they shouldn't.